So the passages on Sunday that we looked at in Deuteronomy chapters 2 and 3 raise a huge ethical question for Bible-believing Christians. For example, if you look at chapter 2 verse 34, at that time, this is Moses recounting what had happened to the Israelites east of the Jordan. At that time, we took all his towns and completely destroyed them, men, women, and children. We left no survivors. How could a good God command the wiping out of a whole race, including men, women, and children? What kind of God would do that? And wouldn't this justify people doing it today? For example, in times of the Crusades, in times gone by. Isn't this just genocide in the worst kind of form, using God as the reason? Well, I think the first thing to say is that God is God. He is just and he is good. He always does what is right. He is the creator and sustainer of all life, and as such, he has the right to determine when life begins and when life ends. It's important to say that right at the beginning. Secondly, the people that we read about being eliminated in the Old Testament here were not morally neutral people. They were sinners. And when God promises to give the land to Abraham's descendants, this is what he says in Genesis chapter 15 to Abraham, "You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure." So in the sovereignty and providence of God, in his perfect timing, he brings the people into the land, the people of Israel, to defeat the Amorites, to take possession of the land, and that perfectly coincided with the people there kind of being at the top of their wickedness. They really were at the height of their evil behavior, some of whom were sacrificing their very children in the fire to a god called Molech. So you have God giving his people the land. At the same time, you have the wickedness of the people reaching its climax there as well. And God coming in judgment, perfect judgment upon those people. Now, one response will be, well, how is that fair for the children? Well, some of those children were being sacrificed, remember, anyway, already. Sadly, though, we have to say that our children so often exhibit general characteristics of their parents. Not always. There are exceptions to that. There's all sorts of rules, exceptions to those rules, but no matter how much we like or don't like it, they learn from us and yet are still personally responsible for their actions. Following on from that, this actually demonstrated a love for God's wider world, not God's hatred of it. The people of Israel were called to be a kingdom of priests, called to be a blessing to the surrounding world. We read that for example, in Exodus chapter 19, just before the Ten Commandments are given. Called to be a blessing to the surrounding world. Abraham was promised that it was through his descendants that all peoples on earth would be blessed. But in order for that to happen, the people of Israel had to be living in faithfulness to God. And then you would have people like the Queen of Sheba coming to King Solomon saying, surely your God actually is God, and actually worshipping him. The danger was, if the people didn't completely remove these people, then the Canaanites that were left would corrupt them, and so they would not be a people of light for the world. If we read, for example, Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 to 11, we see this. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, and drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you, and when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons. And this is important, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, and the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you. This is what you are to do: break down their altars and smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles and burn their idols in the fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the earth, on the face of the earth, to be his people, his treasured possession. I'll leave it there for now. So if Israel doesn't keep God's law, then they will not be blessed as well. We see that in this passage as well. The same judgments will come upon them. They will be destroyed as well. And that's made very clear at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, where we read about God's blessings for obedience and curses for disobedience to him. In fact, the judgment that eventually came on Israel was absolutely terrifying for their disobedience to their God. Furthermore, this wasn't carte blanche for Israel to destroy any nations that they wanted to destroy, only those whose land was given to them and those who were in close proximity to them as well. God clearly sets parameters for the complete destruction of nations. The people of Israel did not get to decide that. That was God who directed that. And for the peoples of those lands, even the peoples of those lands who would adopt Israel's God as their God, there was always the opportunity for redemption. Think, for example, of Rahab, the prostitute in Jericho, when the people go across the river to take possession of the land. She actually recognizes that judgment is coming upon her people and turns to the God of Israel and is saved and rescued. And lastly, but very, very importantly, we are all living under the judgment of death, some sooner and some later. The reason for God delaying his judgment is due to his patience and grace. If we do not repent, we too face this same judgment as well. So, for example, Luke 13, Jesus says this: "Now there were some present at the time who told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices. Jesus answered, 'Do not think that these Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans because they suffered this way. I tell you, no. But unless you too repent, you will all perish. Or those 18 who died when the tower in Siloam fell on them, do you think that they were more guilty than the others living in Jerusalem? I tell you, no. But unless you repent, you too will perish.'" We are called to repent and believe the good news. We are called by Jesus as Christians living under the new covenant to love our enemies and to pray for those who persecute us. As Peter says, we are called to be light. And I'll just conclude with a couple of verses from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. "But you are a chosen people." That is the church today, not the people of Israel. "You're a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." And you see, there's much more that we could say about all of this, I think. But I hope this gives some rationale against the charge that Christians support carte blanche genocide and that God is a God of hatred. He's not. He's a God who loves the world. For God so loved the world in rebellion against him, that world, that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Have a good day, MSC.